Hello, everyone. This is Tom Mann from Loving Company. I just wanted to let you know you have indeed arrived in the right place if you have come to listen and hear from the Ziglar team and myself on the Reasons for Growth, Part 2. So we will begin in approximately 2 minutes, and looking forward to it. Hello, everyone, and welcome. Again, this is Tom Mann from Loving Company. Thank you for attending today's webinar, The Reasons for Growth, Part 2. Today's agenda, just very quickly, we'll do some introductions, discuss why grow and why change, defining the growth of the not-for-profit senior living sector, and then capital planning for growth, and then finally we will have a Q&A. Just a little bit of housekeeping very quickly. We will answer questions at the end of the presentation, so please type into the question box on your GoToWebinar control panel. And in addition, this session will be recorded so that it will be available to share afterwards. Today, I am lucky enough to be joined by Dan Herman and Lisa McCracken from Ziglar. So before we get started, here's just a little bit about ourselves. I've been with Loving Company a little over 8 years. I head up the Loving Company integrated media team, which includes creative, digital, PR, social media, and media services. And I've been focused on senior living a little over 25 years now, having enjoyed large spans of my career in both the for-profit sector with Erickson and the not-for-profit sides of the world, which is the bulk of our clients. Dan?
Good morning, everyone. This is Dan Herman at Ziglar, President and CEO, Head of Investment Banking, and Head of our Senior Living practice. I've been at Ziglar for 30-plus years, and in that time period on the Senior Living team, led over 300 senior living financings for over $8 billion in conjunction with other Ziglar team members. As part of my role at Ziglar, I serve on a number of not-for-profit boards as well as a number of our Ziglar Linkage portfolio company boards. Big Northwestern fan with an MBA from Northwestern and undergrad from Illinois State, and formerly a certified public accountant. But we'll get into more about Ziglar here in a moment. Lisa?
Yeah, hello everyone. I'm Lisa McCracken. I am the Director of Research with Ziglar. Glad to be a part of today's webinar. So I joined Ziglar in 2013, but have been in the industry and in the senior living and aging services space for about 20 years now. And the majority of that time has really been in research and consulting. So at Ziglar, I oversee all of our research, our surveys, a number of the different publications, which we'll reference some of them today, and also have the opportunity to get out and about with a number of you with speaking at different state and national conferences. We also do a good bit of work with different providers and on the strategy side of things, and tie in the research and trends work with the strategy and forward looking work that the boards and leadership teams do. So glad to be a part of today's webinar.
Thank you, Lisa. And, you know, I am feeling so honored to have both Lisa and Dan on the line. The reason Loving Company asked Ziglar to participate in this session is twofold. First, they are clearly, and if you look at this graph, you can see they are clearly the leaders in senior living financing. And also they do some amazing research. And so while I'm going to lead the presentation off today, I will tell you, you should really stand by for the incredible research that they're going to share with us. So, Lisa, Lisa and Dan, before I move on, is there anything else you wanted to add to that?
I would just, and Tom, thanks for those comments. I would just add, in particular, as we're coming off our very successful 22nd annual Ziglar Strategy and Finance Conference, where we had a substantial number of our clients and industry friends in attendance. We're just very proud to be serving the not-for-profit marketplace, from multi-facility organizations that are part of the leading age Ziglar 200 down to numerous single-site organizations from metropolitan areas, large and small, to rural areas. And we're a proud gold sponsor of Leading Age National and a sponsor to most of the state leading age organizations, bringing multiple financing solutions from rated transactions, A, triple B, or double B, down to unrated, as well as a number of new location financings and seed capital across the gamut of financing structures. So we have a team of 35 plus folks around the country, and that's what makes it fun for us. And then when Lisa goes back into her research, those team members are providing us insights from around the country that we can then capture and distill information back to our client base. Thanks, Tom, and back to you.
Thanks, Dan. Well, as many of you know, this webinar is the second of a two-part series on why grow. And by the way, if you haven't seen part one with Katie Smith-Sloan of Leading Age, John Cochran of Human Good, and Doug Levy of Asbury Communities, I highly recommend you visit our website to watch that first webinar. So anyway, here we go. Why grow? Well, the answer is simply to meet demand. If you look at this chart, look at the annual growth in 2025. It's over 4% annual growth. By 2040, there will be nearly 45 million seniors over the age of 75, almost doubling where we are now. Pretty astounding numbers. So the other thing to realize about that population is that the customer is changing from who we're serving today. You know, if we slide down to 65 plus, the population nearly doubles by 2060. The older population is becoming more racially diverse. The diversity gap between the generations, and that continues to be something Loving Company's focused on, is looking at the diversity factor and how we can actually attract more people from diverse backgrounds. And obviously, the industry as a whole is looking at aging in place. The positive developments is, one, education levels are increasing. Life expectancy has increased. The gender gap, good news, guys. The gender gap is actually narrowing as men are living longer. And all of that comes with some challenges. Obesity rates among the 60 plus crowd have been increasing. worldwide economic disparities. Older adults more frequently are divorced, and we'll get into that certainly. A steep rise in Americans living with Alzheimer's disease. And by the way, if you look, 75% of the not-for-profits had dedicated memory care units, which is an increase of 15% from 60% from just last year. So significant growth in this area. And obviously, uncertainty over the future of Social Security and Medicare. One thing we know about today's prospects is that their expectations have grown and changed. The question of whether you can meet those expectations is dependent on how your organization is reacting to change. Right now, I can tell you Love & Company, and certainly Ziglar can echo this, we're seeing a lot more mergers, acquisitions, and partnerships than ever before. I believe this is a result of organizations trying to react to these changes. The most obvious change is that we are now dealing with a tidal wave of baby boomers, and we know they have very different expectations. They are driven by experiences. So I'm going to show you a short video, hopefully this works, that gives you an idea of how expectations are changing. This is just one example.
Biz up, everybody, and welcome to the grand opening in world-famous Daytona Beach, Florida, for the Latitude Margaritaville 55 and Better Community Sales Center. It's a lot to say, but there's a lot going on here. Because yesterday, 24 hours ago, people started getting ready to line up for the grand opening that happens 9 a.m. today, because it was like a tailgate. We actually brought in coffee and some pizzas. Some people brought their own cocktails, you know, as people do at a real tailgate. It was like an overnight slumber party to get ready for the big day, for people to have the opportunity to select the lot they wanted and the home they wanted at Margaritaville and Minto's teaming up facility here in Daytona Beach, Florida. Here's that footage. Tell us about how you became the first people in line, how that all came about, and that you're going to be Margaritaville's first family.
Well, we arrived at 8:20 yesterday morning, which would have been Sunday morning, right? Yeah, Sunday morning, and been camped out here ever since.
And we were fully prepared to camp out for a few days. Well, we got off a cruise ship in Miami at 7 a.m., and we drove up here, and my husband said, do you want to go home first, or should we drive by? And I said, well, let's just drive by around 10:30, 11. And I saw the line, and I said, well, let me out.
We've been to Margaritaville, like in Mexico, and that place. You couldn't believe it. I mean, we were here since they started building.
And we keep driving by. We're, waiting for the Welcome Center to open, and we're in there almost every day, just excited. As a place to live, for me, the inclusiveness of everything together, the family atmosphere, as opposed to a gated community, nobody really knows one another. And to be able to be in a cart and go to a dog park, to go to the beach, to go to the pool, and everything be included in our mortgage, to me, that's the big bonus. There are other communities that offer these amenities, but not the beach. And that's another plus. And to have someone shuttle me to and from the beach, we're all set to sign the papers and get the party started.
And hopefully you get the idea. I won't continue with the video, but now, granted, Jimmy Buffett has an amazing brand that has an aspirational lifestyle connotations for many people. I mean, come on, who doesn't want a margarita right now? But there's a lesson here. How do we make our communities more aspirational? Do you need to be looking at different product, different relationships, partnerships, like obviously the branding required Jimmy Buffett here. So think about the out-of-the-box thinking that was involved here. I could just imagine in most boardrooms saying, hey, here's an idea, let's partner with Jimmy Buffett. I mean, I think in most instances that probably would have gotten you thrown out of the boardroom. So the next thing is research among the next generation of seniors who are or who will soon be age and income qualified to move to a life plan community. consistently shows a preference to move to a setting where a broad array of community amenities and services are within walking distance. This includes shops, restaurants, parks, museums, music venues. I think you get the idea. It's certainly the type of retirement that my wife and I have been talking about. This generation of customers wants to be close and involved in an active, vital community, not separated from it. I'm not sure who coined the term age ghettos, but certainly boomers are not looking to be stuck in a corner. As a result, many organizations are considering the development of satellite communities. These are smaller developments of independent living residences with more limited amenity offerings on that satellite campus, but still with access to the main campus so that the members have full membership access to all the amenities and services of the larger campus. So as additional support for this trend, in a research study that Love & Company that we conducted for a community in Richmond, Virginia in late 2016, I believe it was, nearly half of the non-wait list people we spoke to in the study listed an urban walkable location as either their first or second choice out of 6 possible locations for a satellite community, more than any other location, including the community's current location. By the way, I think, and many of our team think, that this is a trend that will increase the need for at-home settings or offerings. Now, Love & Company's consumer research over the past decade or so has consistently shown an increasing preference among seniors for rental housing. Customers feel rental contracts provide them with more flexibility and choice from both a financial and a lifestyle perspective. They also perceive it as being significantly less expensive, primarily because there's no entrance fee, right? And you know, therefore, these communities have greater appeal to moderate middle-income market. By the way, this picture here is the Delaney at Bridgewater, which is part of LCS's Delaney rental brand. I attended a conference, I can't recall which one it was at the moment, but LCS stated that they will be aggressively pursuing the rental market in the coming years. And as you know, Dan and Lisa will share in just a bit, the bulk of new construction in senior living has been for-profit, and much of it has been rental. So food, we all love food. And with over 100 different food shows now on the air, Americans have turned into foodies, and I'm certainly in that group. And who has the most money to spend on restaurants and food? That's right, boomers and seniors. So their expectations have changed. The question you need to ask is, has your dining program changed? Do you still have dining rooms, or do you have restaurants? Do you still have a restrictive meal plan? Have you thought about opening up the meal plan with restaurants in the local area outside your campus? Do you have any partnerships on campus? You know, certainly one good example of this is Garden Spot. I visited them, and they have a Starbucks, a full-blown Starbucks right on their campus. Also, do you have a boutique community or satellite community downtown near great restaurants and shows, or are you still thinking that the model's out in the suburbs? So, and last, again, back to the Jimmy Buffett example, I'd think there are some opportunities for branded partnerships. So I like how this photo provides the perfect segue. Yes, tops of the list of wants for younger singles will be dining experiences, and life plan communities will work harder to attract younger singles simply because there's going to be a lot more of them, and I'll show you a little bit here in a second. So while divorce is currently on the decline for younger couples, divorce among Americans in the 50-plus crowd has more than doubled since the 1990s. This trend is called gray divorce, and I believe it's going to shape how senior communities think about floor plan sizes, service options, and social opportunities on and off campus. These are going to have to be opportunities that are attractive to single people who are looking to mingle with other folks. And, you know, while these sheer numbers might look relatively low, in comparison to other age groups, the jump in percentages is startling. So boomers actually got divorced earlier at a higher rate than previous generations, and many of them never remarried. So you're seeing the composition of senior households shifting dramatically in the last 2 decades. So more and more people are living alone. Only 29.5% of senior households aged 65 and older were living alone in the year 2000, and that has increased to 43.3%. That's what it was in 2016, and I'm sure it's even higher now. But definitely it's a growing population we need to consider. So higher divorce rates, more people never getting married, and folks living longer are all kind of contributing to more singles. So I'm going to show you another short clip that highlights the growing number of single seniors, particularly women, and how one group is reacting to this.
The fastest growing demo is that. The Golden Girls were a hit in the 80s, but with more girls in their golden years now, the roommate business is booming. So 69-year-old Mariam Ephraim and 55-year-old Megan Knavel are strangers who moved in together. Knavel needed a cheap room. I work in the nonprofit sector. If you know anything about that, we don't make a ton of money. Ephraim needed someone to care for her pets if she's hospitalized or call 911 if she falls, which has happened.
That's a very frightening thing when you can't get up and there's nobody there.
It's great, mostly. Think of them as the new Golden Girls. That 80s hit is even more relevant now. Airbnb says seniors are their fastest growing host demographic, with women in the majority. And sites like Silvernest connect people 55 and older who are looking to share rooms. That's the site which brought these two together.
I like it. I think it's a really good idea. Turns out she and I are both originally from the Midwest. We both like sci-fi movies.
But they've also learned that moving in together in their golden years is different than in their 20s.
You live by yourself, you get set in your ways, you don't have to deal with other personalities or other issues.
Really? Megan has learned to deal with Mariam's cats, and Mariam has learned to respect Megan's privacy. And which Golden Girl do they most resemble?
I'm a cross between the wild child in Rue McClanahan and B. Arthur.
Oh, I'm B. Arthur. Can't you see that? Well, I'm Estelle Getty. Silvernest charges homeowners $29.99 for 3 months to be matched with potential roommates, and it charges the roommates the same fee for a background check if one is expected. And 70% of the homeowners on the site are female, 55% of prospective roommates. And Kelly, the advice from our 2 friends we met there in Tempe outside Phoenix: talk about differences, there will be some, and identify your boundaries.
Definitely a reminder that technology is squeezing into our competitive space. So two quick questions. How does your community appeal to singles? And how do you think about your floor plans and service options? You know, I think there's definitely product opportunities out there for us. We just have to think outside of our current model. Our model's going to have to change.
The fastest growing.
So another factor is many more boomers aspire to stay employed, both for money and for mental engagement. 2 of my favorite books, Blue Zones and The Purpose Economy, talk about the importance of having meaningful daily engagement. For many people, that connection and purpose comes from vocational activities, whether they're paid or volunteer. So, and then also figure or add into that the additional thought of seniors are living longer. So they're seeing the need for increased saving. This is particularly true for the upper middle class, the demographic that typically moves into our communities. So what are the implications of lifetime employment to your community? One, we're going to have to, I think, modify how we financially qualify people, taking into account their current income potential. We're going to have to change that process during the sales process because right now we really don't allow allowance for active earning income. I also think that our prospects will be looking for co-working spaces that allow them and also non-residents of multiple disciplines to share office spaces and ideas, much like we're seeing in the sharing economy outside of the gates of our campuses. And then the concept of live where you work, eat, and play, I think will become a competitive advantage for communities that understand the power of this positioning. And then probably the most obvious, and many folks are already moving to this, is to drop the term retirement from your organization's label. Many of our residents are no longer retiring in the traditional sense. The next trend I want to talk about is technology. And Rob Love said, and Rob, I hope you're listening, in 2018, he said, it's clear that smart technology is here to stay and a very real factor in the marketability of homes today. As such, I think it will quickly become a basic expectation of boomers as they begin to consider life plan communities more and more. To be ready, our communities need to be planning for this today. Well, Rob said that last year, so if you haven't already moved in this direction, you're already that much further behind. Now, why does senior technology, why has it failed in the past? Here are some reasons. And a good example of a group getting this right, in my opinion, is K4 Connect. The key to K4 Connect's success, in my somewhat insider view of this, and I pay attention to this stuff, is that they've made a tool that people, residents, that yes, the 85-year-old, that they find convenient and valuable to their day. Derek was telling me that 100% use the platform as a universal remote to run their home, even those who call assisted living home. And they have over a 50% engagement with their communication tools every week. So, oh, and Dan and Lisa, a plug for you guys. Ziegler's Linkage Fund is driving some or a lot of this newer technology that we're seeing pop up, and maybe Dan and Lisa will have a chance to talk a little bit about that in a second. So the next trend I wanted to talk about is the qualified self-digital trend, which I think will continue to gain traction with boomers. These digital interventions, and when I say interventions, think about every resident perhaps getting an Apple Watch or a Gear S2 smartwatch as part of their move-in package. And with this watch, they'll be able to create some positive interventions. We'll see everything from fitness to sleep to glucose monitoring, everything ideally improving wellness and empowering the residents to be the champions of their own health. You're certainly seeing this with the boomers. They want to be in charge of their health, and technology is allowing us to really track a lot of that. So residents will be enabled to attack and manage health issues that are either chronic or acute. I predict that insurers such as Kaiser and Humana that are already studying these digital interventions will soon partner with progressive communities to improve success rates of resident treatments and lowering readmissions. In addition, all of this personal health care information now being collected will be compared in larger data sets of people with similar medical backgrounds, both genetic similarities and medical history, in new ways to improve treatments. So boomers want to track their own health. They want to take care of themselves, spiritually, physically, intellectually, emotionally, and financially, rather than being taken care of. So we have to move away from the healthcare mentality of we take care of you and move into the hospitality area where we serve them and help enable them to live the healthiest, richest life possible. So again, I believe communities will model their wellness programs after things like Canyon Ranch. As a benefit of living at the community, residents will receive complete executive fitness exams like those given at the Cleveland Clinic. The community's medical, fitness, and dining teams will all be part of a well-coordinated effort. So to give you an idea of what I'm talking about, I'd like to show you a short video from the Cleveland Clinic that showcases where I think we should be going.
Proactive management of one's health is just absolutely critical. I mean, you just can't go without it. And that's really what this is all about for me, coming to Cleveland Clinic, is staying on top of my health.
All is attention to detail. You get a report which is very comprehensive. You can learn a lot about yourself and improve yourself, a location, and then is the speed of everything happening so you don't feel you waste time.
To date, if you look at the normal medical model, it's very disease-focused. It's very doctor-patient driven, whereby patients can participate, but not to the point that there's any kind of behavioral change in their participation. Where in Cleveland Clinic Canada, what we want to do is we want to see the patient before disease. We want to look at how can we see that patient in another way to prevent, hopefully, disease from coming. And in that, the patient becomes the focus of the wheel. That's patient-centered. And with that in mind, you try to organize the patient up so that they themselves take ownership of lifestyle modification.
It's a total investment, not only in what's going on with them now, but really what's going to happen to their health in the future.
The day consists of a 5-hour on-site day. The nurse will take your vital signs, do tonometry, which is a test for glaucoma, spirometry, which is a test for lungs, and also do a hearing test. You'll meet with a phlebotomist who takes blood from you, and we do a screening panel looking at your hemoglobin, make sure your liver is okay, make sure your kidneys, you're not diabetic, a whole bunch of tests. The other providers include a dietitian, exercise physiologist, psychologist, and you'll also have a stress test. You'll have radiology if that is necessary for your day, bone mineral densities, mammograms, or ultrasounds. After that, you have an hour with the doctor. During that time, you'll have a history, physical. They leave here with a prescription, which is much different than giving a medication. They leave here with a prescription that they can take throughout the year and hopefully throughout their whole life to change life behaviors.
So you get the idea, but imagine a resident moves in and they get the prescription for healthy living. One of the unique selling benefits Life Plan communities have is we have the closed ecosystem with each of these components that will allow them to actually reach wellness at a much higher level. And I believe this has got to be our secret weapon against technology kind of making it so that you can easily stay at home. What the home does not offer is this closed ecosystem. So who's getting it right? I believe one really good example of an organization coming close to achieving this is Moorings Park. So in addition to creating the Center for Healthy Living, Moorings Park has entered a relationship, a partnership with the Naples Community Hospital. And they've implemented this concierge medical model, which offers patients, their residents, a higher level of personalized primary care. Through the partnership, the residents receive a higher personalized health management program and assessment program with on-site primary care physicians, watching to see how they're doing and emphasizing preventative care. as well as fitness and nutrition counseling. So again, back to that closed ecosystem, a life plan community has the medical, the wellness, the nutrition, and even the social and spiritual components that are important. The other thing that's really kind of cool about Mornings Park is they're, I think, the only community I've ever noticed that is a designated Blue Zone project or approved work site. The Blue Zones project, by the way, encourages employers and their employees to choose healthier options, resulting in lower healthcare costs, improved productivity, and ultimately just a higher quality of life. But also think about it in terms of combating turnover, and this as an additional benefit that they're able to provide their employees. So with that, I will now hand the baton over to Lisa and Dan, who will walk you through some of Ziglar's amazing new research.
Great, thanks, Tom. That was fantastic. Great intro. So Dan and I are just going to go through a series of slides here and just take a little different angle on the whole why grow, why change conversation. Then we are going to share some information of what we've seen around those change components, the growth, how are the not-for-profit providers growing or not growing, and give some updated stats on that. But what you see in front of you is what is termed really the not-for-profit life cycle. You've probably seen different versions of this, but you could argue as you look through the stage 1 through 5 there that really the not-for-profit senior living sector is at a pretty pivotal point of really that review and renew, stage 5, and really needing to take a look at what do we need to do to innovate and continue to stay relevant, keeping all those things that Tom mentioned in mind, the competitive environment and things that we're going to get into a little bit deeper here momentarily, to continue, this, thriving element and being successful in the future and relevant in the future. This graphic really just shows how you can move that needle, but it requires change and openness to change. We do sometimes run into those organizations and the boards that may say, we're good with the status quo, and we've been successful for the last 30 years and so forth. But it's important to acknowledge that the next 30 years is going to look very different than the last 30. And I would also acknowledge, too, when we talk about review and renew, stage 5 of the not-for-profit life cycle, we've got many organizations that are over 100 years old, 150 years old. So you've had to change a number of times. We've been through this iteration and change period before, and we're just at that point where you need to take a look at your name. Tom used the word retirement, and those are nomenclatures important for the next generation of the customer. And we're just in a different business cycle. The healthcare environment is very different. So openness and willingness to change is pivotal. So what are some of the benefits of growth? And I'm going to talk that there are some potential drawbacks. We certainly don't think that the drawbacks outweigh any benefits, but continued diversification. That's one of the things that the not-for-profits do well, tend to really often will expand the continuum, whether it's the housing portion, it may be affordable housing, market rate. You may also have home and community-based service lines. You may be in some joint ventures. That's great, and I think that's a really healthy growth strategy to continue to look at where aren't we and where can we be. And that obviously just allows you to be a better one-stop shop for wherever your future customer needs. If it's in their home, in the greater community, or within your life plan community, you're there to offer those things. Just from a financial, operational standpoint, there are indeed benefits of scale, with size. And we often get asked the question, how big is big enough? We wrote a Z News article on this, I think it was about a year or so ago. There's no magical number to this. I can tell you that we often tend to look at it in the terms of revenue, because that revenue mix can be very different depending on the different service lines that you have. But we do tend to see organizations, once they hit that 100 million mark and up, the ability to hire a chief information officer, the ability to do certain things, and you see up there attracting better talent and leadership. The reality is that at a certain point, you're able to bring in the expertise that you need and be able to keep up with the changes in technology, with the healthcare reform environment. Having a career ladder is incredibly important. I will tell you, when you talk about the millennial, generation and workforce, that's very important to them, the personal and professional development opportunities. Clearly, the ability to borrow capital. Dan's going to talk, a little toward the end about just capital planning for growth, but just even managing risk. When you've got all your eggs in one basket, one service line across one location, if you hit a bump in the road, that's a little scarier journey than if you're able to spread that risk around. So clearly one of the benefits of growth. Expanding into underserved markets and inherent with the not-for-profit conversation is the mission piece. And this slide really just gives, some statements around fulfillment of existing mission, expanding of mission, redefining your shift in mission. There are some organizations that, go through a strategic planning process at the board level and might say, we really see our shift going in this direction, and maybe it's low income, or maybe it's we've got greater purpose in intergenerational, so let's expand above and beyond just older adults and into youth and family services. So but these conversations are important to have, and is really at the core of the governance responsibilities for the not-for-profits. Dan and I are going to talk, certainly about defensive growth. He's going to do a little deeper dive into some of the private sector activities in recent years, but some of your growth may come from wanting to expand the mission, but also maybe protecting your mission. So preserving that not-for-profit piece. And when we talk about some of the statistics around some of the slowdown around new locations within the not-for-profit sector, increases in dispositions and closures of communities, it's really important at the national level for the not-for-profit providers to really embrace this preserving the not-for-profit legacy, because we're candidly losing ground a little bit in that respect. So, defensive growth can be an important motivator, and you got to know your market. If you were in a market where Tom showed the demographics, I mean, that can vary market to market. Some have greater growth than others, but it's pretty safe to assume that we know that the population is increasing. And if your marketplace is full and you've got a 3-year wait list and sort of every housing opportunity in the area is 95 plus occupancy, you can guarantee somebody else is going to go in there and take advantage of those growth opportunities if you do not. Just acknowledging that there's just that increased competitive framework. So we saw the Golden Girls clip. I mean, just even different types of competition than what we've had before. It's just causing us to rethink our business models and just look differently. Even when you look at the home and community-based services and what technology is allowing individuals to do, you've got Best Buy, you've got Amazon, you've got Apple, all of these organizations and companies with devices, with monitoring, getting into, healthy aging. And it's really a much easier environment to age in place. And that's all a competitive situation and scenario for somebody choosing to move into a community. Again, the private sector has grown exponentially. Dan's going to show some graphs around this, but the private sector has been around 9% growth. We, in the not-for-profit space, has been at 2%. I want to call attention to that 243 there, which is the red circle. What we at Ziglar did was we just took a look at, from January through August of this year, Senior Housing News. It comes out every single day. Once a week, they have a called In Your Pipeline article, which it just pulls headlines of community openings, expansions, repositionings. We just did a simple count. Okay, how many were not-for-profit sponsored versus how many are coming from the for-profit space? And we broke it out of expansions, repositionings versus new campuses. You can see very clearly there's tremendous growth, particularly on new location development among the private sector. Not necessarily the entry fee life plan community that's been solely dedicated. I don't want to say solely, there's a few exceptions, but that's really dominated by the not-for-profit providers. Dan's going to get a little deeper into what we're seeing in terms of the type of growth out of that space, but it's clearly pressuring the not-for-profit sector. So I think we talked about the benefits that you see on the left-hand side of your mission, economies of scale, managing risk, diversification. There can be some drawbacks. I think that these are just things to be aware of, not insurmountable barriers, but as you enter into any growth proposition, it's all right, so how are we going to explain this to the residents? So that stakeholder piece, which if they don't understand growth and sometimes are reluctant to change, how do we provide some sense making for them? do we have the capital to even grow? You know, the intent can be great, but if you don't have the resources to grow, clearly that can be a pretty significant barrier to those initiatives. Your resources demands put on staff. Growth can be great, but if that means just one more thing for your leadership team and even, you know, resources on the board, that's important to keep in mind. You know, you can't take your eye off the current operations and focus all of your energies on, you know, the new shiny penny, right? So some of the organizations have fallen into that trap, and you got to be aware of that. And then the risk of failure, failure can be okay, and you can learn from that. But generally, the not-for-profit sector can be fairly risk-averse, and that can sometimes hold the growth potential back among the not-for-profits. You know, and that whole risk tolerance piece, we've got a graphic here, and I'll advance to the next one in a second, but the whole growth and change conversation needs to happen at a number of different levels. Clearly, the leadership team and the board need to be the main drivers of that, but there needs to be alignment. You know, sometimes we've seen disconnect where there's a very, I would say, aggressive CEO with very ambitious growth goals, and the board's not there. So what do you need to do to get there? Or vice versa, board may say, you know, we want you to get from A to B and, you know, every year between now and, you know, 2025, and you've got a CEO that has some reservations with that, or doesn't have the support of, you know, the rest of the organization. So you need to spend time working through the why grow, why change. I will tell you, this is the perfect world. It doesn't always happen that way, but you need to spend a little more time getting in your line. And what this shows here is that there's not one right answer. Every organization is a little bit different. I think we would all agree that, you know, if your risk tolerance is down in the 0, 1, or 2, we're probably going to continue to see the competitors run circles around us. So we would encourage a little more openness to change and risk, but you know, the point is you need to spend time all getting on the same page. So we're going to transition from the why grow, why change conversation into sort of defining growth. So when we say growth, what do we mean by this? So again, it's not just all, you know, new bricks and mortar. So, you know, growth is indeed expansions and repositions. The not-for-profits have done an excellent job of that. It's new community locations. Dan's going to talk about the sponsorship transition category of what we've been seeing. You know, it can be growth beyond your 4 walls of your campuses. Joint ventures increasingly common, and creativity around for-profit ventures. A number of organizations are growing in that regard. Dan, I'm going to hand it over to you to comment further on this one and then take us into overall growth observations.
Thanks, Lisa. That was a great setup, as well as from Tom. So as Lisa noted, the not-for-profit market continues to grow through these drivers, and we've been using the words real estate settings and HCBS or service lines as a way to differentiate. It is good to see growth happening on both, although we're going to be showing you statistics where the growth on the real estate side is much slower than the for-profit side, as we alluded to on the first statistic. And then I'll be getting into a lot of the growth around sponsorship, transition, affiliation, and why, which is a wonderful way to see organizations grow, have more locations under the leadership of one organization, and then there tends to be reinvestment into those organizations at the same time. If we can go to the next page.
I think I will control here. Did somebody else take over? There we go. All right.
Okay, super. So we mentioned not-for-profit organizational growth is picking up, which is good. But Tom's word, he said earlier, to meet the demand, we all need to think about. And some of the observations from the not-for-profit leaders have been, if we can simply maintain our current market share position as a driver from an orientation as not-for-profits, to say we're very good at providing quality settings for residential living and care, as well as HCBS service lines. If we can just hold our market share, growth would be substantial, matching that 4% growth that Tom had mentioned. And we do have some organizations striving to do that. That's one theme to think through. So we do have a number of larger multi-facility organizations growing at meaningful clips. Presbyterian Homes and Communities of Minnesota, who just presented at our conference, led by Dan Lin, would be one example of that. But there's a number of others also growing at a fairly decent clip. But overall, the not-for-profit sector is obviously not growing at the pace of the for-profit sector. Again, the reminder of the stat you saw from Lisa, just this year, 234 for-profit locations announced and 12 not-for-profit through just tracking the pipeline report from Senior Housing News. So for-profit continues to outpace not-for-profit. We don't see that changing. So that's a very important point. With the demographics playing out the way you've seen, we hear and listen, see and meet for-profit providers, and we try and call that private sector. It's simply a response to a market opportunity. And the majority of that growth is coming from organizations that have 2, 3, 5, 6, 10 locations and are looking to move to their next level of growth and build out their management teams, as opposed to seeing new locations coming from larger organizations with 100 or 200 or 500, Brookdale being a good example of a public company that, if you follow the announcement, is going through various permutations of real estate structure for their organization. So they're not spending time on new locations, but again, it's the smaller organizations looking to grow rapidly that's driving that heavy for-profit growth. So our not-for-profits, as I noted, are growing through affiliation, acquisition, and merger, and we'll show you a chart on that in a second and reasons behind that. And then the not-for-profit providers are doing a wonderful job investing in existing campuses, maxing out the real estate setting they have, acquiring adjacent land to existing settings, working with very good architects and marketing organizations like Love to get their plans in place to maximize their existing brand. That's happening all over the country. And as we're going to market with, we'll probably go to market with $3 billion of senior living capital this year, some of that refinancing, but a lot of that new capital to existing campuses. So that is going very well. And we recommend continuing from a growth perspective to build as much scale as you can at your existing campuses and striving to be the leader, or at least number 2 in your PMAs. But many of our not-for-profits are the leader in their PMA. And then, as Lisa noted, and she'll expand on it in a minute, lots of growth through home and community-based services, which then adds scale from a revenue perspective to the organization, and of course leads to serving more folks. Next page. So we just released the Leading Age Ziglar 200. Lisa is the manager of that project. This is the 16th year. We're very proud of this partnership with Leading Age to be able to produce what amounts to the Fortune 500 of not-for-profit senior living through multiple lists, the market rate listing, but there also is the listing of the largest affordable providers, and our not-for-profit providers can be very proud of that, but growing through affordable is very difficult now. Tom mentioned all of the different income levels that need to be served, but it is very difficult to grow in the affordable area, in the affordable area beyond the tax credit programs that currently exist. Take a look at that if you haven't seen it. When you look at the growth of those organizations, and this is the top 10 as a proxy for the top 200, you see, as we click through the chart, you'll see back in the 90s and 2000s, rapid growth of the not-for-profit sector, in particular through what was then called CCRCs and the formation of systems. Then we hit the recession, and unfortunately, this ties directly to this session. The recession really set back the not-for-profit sector. There's no question it played out in the market that the entry fee model, when you're in the middle of development or fill up during a recession and dependent on home sales, took more of a hit than the rental model, and longer to recover, and longer for our boards and management teams, if we just look across the whole spectrum, to get back to an orientation of growth and risk after having experienced, whether it's a single site or one community in a multi-facility system, the challenges of filling out campuses and working with lenders that may have been putting pressure on the situation. So then as we move into this last 7 or 8 years, growth has come back at a clip of about 2.8% for the leading age Ziglar 200 as a whole, and a faster clip for the top 10 that this depicts. But with that growth coming through expansion of existing campuses, but being slowed down by the disposition and pruning of the tree of dated settings, in particular skilled nursing settings. So if we laid this line against the for-profit growth, you'll see in a moment, the for-profit side is outstripping the not-for-profit side. So if we look at how the growth has played out on this next chart, and the breakout of the new locations, and this is from the leading age Ziglar 200, so we're able to isolate the new locations from the 200. It's been averaging about 10 a year, roughly, or about 50 every 5 years. And it's not just life plan communities, which is good. It's one reason at Ziglar we try and use the word new location. And as you can see on the right-hand side, life plan communities were about a third, primarily IL, which is popular and includes satellites, about a third, and then about a third for AL memory care or new nursing. Almost all of the new nursing are dedicated specialty rehab centers geared to the Medicare side of the business, although we don't see many of those coming up in the future. That represented 22% over the last 5 years. When we look to the future, and we're going to show you a map here of where the new locations have been, but when we look to the future and identify future growth, we still are identifying roughly 50 a year from the not-for-profit sector. We know there'll be more, but we're hoping as a result of sessions like this and our conference last week that on the not-for-profit side, we'll start to see a pickup on new locations. But if you look at the type that were open, I'm sorry, go back very quickly there. If you look at the type that were open, it's all from multi-facility organizations. So the day of the new not-for-profit and not-for-profit senior living has been over for years and years. Very few and far between, and if it is, it's usually a university or a federation or so on. So this is existing systems who are also doing affiliations and reinvesting in existing campuses, branching out with new locations. So good to see with different types of product around the country. We just hope to see more for the benefit of the not-for-profit sector. So on the next page, you'll see how we've isolated from the leading age Ziglar 200 what I just described going back to 2010. So dispositions and closures averaging approximately 35 a year, or an amazing 317 just from the leading age Ziglar 200. When we look at the entire sector, Lisa and our research team have identified nearly 600 since 2010 that have changed ownership. Most of that's closure of dated, obsolete, economically obsolete nursing homes, or disposition of the same to principally the for-profit sector, where the skilled nursing operators of the for-profit sector are consolidating nursing homes, and then also included the transfer of ownership of some challenged life plan communities, and then of course we're counting any of the other dispositions that have occurred in the not-for-profit sector. But relative to new openings, which have been averaging again approximately 10 a year, the not-for-profit total outstanding supply has been shrinking amazingly. You would think with the demographic opportunity it would be growing, but over this last decade it's been a net negative from just an opening and closing perspective. The growth in that unit count of 2.8% is principally from expansions. So if we look at our next page, one of the neat opportunities, and Tom and Lisa both alluded to it, are satellite campuses as an alternative to a full build out. And we know our not-for-profit client base or provider base is very good at operating life plan communities that span from IL to assisted living and memory care to nursing, typically on 20 to 40 acres. And of course, we've got some with many more acres and some with less, but it's hard to secure that land. Everyone we talk to says their biggest issue to pursuing growth, in particular in large metro areas, is identifying appropriate parcels that can support a full continuum. Excuse me, but finding land to do a satellite ideally in a urban setting where it can be a community integrated setting that Tom alluded to. A number of folks are pursuing. He mentioned Maureen's Park as one example of the healthy living lifestyle. They presented at our conference last week and highlighted their 2 satellite locations in the Naples area. Is one organization that's been able to leverage off their existing main campus. So typically the satellite will have ties to the brand of the campus, have access to healthcare, have access to management and infrastructure, but typically be focused on a lifestyle, independent living community. We hope to see more of those. We know a number of architects and marketing firms, including Love, are focused on that. So back to our not-for-profit sponsorship transitions. We're doing a number of sessions on this around the country. We presented to a number of the leading age state associations. People want to understand and learn what is this an option they should look at from a strategic perspective to partner with another organization or join another organization or be out scouting for organizations that may want to join them. So as I mentioned, since 2010, 651 organizations have changed ownership through either those dispositions that we mentioned or mergers or acquisitions. So in this slide where you see by the end of September 2019, 446 transactional events with 651 communities changing ownership. So the reason for the difference is when there's a merger or affiliation of 2 organizations, such as Elam, Cara, and Augustana in Minnesota, joining together to become Cassia, we count the smaller organization as the one that had the ownership change. So there's a number of those affiliations included, along with a number of single-site organizations joining larger organizations. This is being driven by the need for scale. Not everyone uses the word scale, but that's generally what's embedded around the themes of complexity of dealing with today's healthcare environment, which can be very challenging, as we know, dealing with the leadership turnover. And so a number of these transactions have occurred when a leader, such principally the CEO, is turning over. That leads the board to say, is this a good time to look to join a larger organization? And and then, of course, that competition in particular from the for-profit sector with so much fresh new product is causing people to want to be part of larger organizations. And then technology and the need to invest in technology is another major driver, as well as the labor market. So, of course, we saw this play out in the healthcare sector, and it continues to play out. And I'd say the not-for-profit senior living sector is 20 or 25 years behind. You can, of course, be a very successful single-site location. That's why I use the word scale. The question is how much scale, from a revenue-based perspective, is needed in your individual market, your PMA, from a large metropolitan area down to medium, down to rural, in order for you to stay highly occupied and be number 1 or 2 in your market. You don't have to be part of a multi-facility organization, but you do want to be in a position to be successful financially. So when you look at the growth that has been occurring, the growth from affiliations and mergers and acquisitions has now outpaced for our leading age Ziglar 200 by a meaningful amount in the last 5 years, as you might imagine, if we're only averaging 10 new locations from the leading age Ziglar 200. We'd love to see that the new location side catch up with the merger and affiliation and acquisition. We know the consolidation trends will continue for the new campus side to catch up. We believe our organizations need to add more resources around growth. So we have a number of organizations that have added heads of growth and development that we're going to show in a moment. We need a certain amount of more resources focused around new locations to allow for that catch up. But when we look back to these affiliations and mergers, here's a sample list just since the middle of 2018 or the start of 2018. So very recently, the BHI organization in Indianapolis acquired the Barrington of Carmel to bring them to 5 campuses to 4 right in their market. So they were very proactive about pursuing that. Go down 2 lines from that, UMRC in Central Michigan affiliating in Porter Hills. And we worked on that transaction, and that set up a larger central Michigan to Grand Rapids system as another great example. So you can look down this page and you see various scenarios around the country of single sites joining larger systems, or certain mergers of one system to another. The most unique one on the list on the merger affiliation side is Presby's Inspired Life merging into Human Good, setting the stage for a national scope for a system, and we'll be watching that to see what some of the developments are coming out of that merger. So Lisa's going to now pick up on the growth coming from the what we call HCBS area. Lisa, I'll turn it over to you.
So this is a graphic that just simply, outlines that there are a number of options and service lines and models that fall under that HCBS bucket. So everything from PACE, which is the nursing home alternative and has seen really great growth throughout the country, to unlicensed home care, to more licensed home health, hospice. We're going to continue to see this graphic grow and the different options change, and some may not even have a clear name or title, this whole co-housing evolution. But the point is, there's great opportunity to be a partner here, to be a leader, and to expand beyond the community that you may currently have. This is just some information that shows how many not-for-profits are in that home and community-based services area. The left side shows the multi-site providers from the LZ200. The right side shows the single-site providers. So we do see that the larger the organization you are, the more likely you're going to have some type of HCBS platform. But even among the single sites, almost half have some type of, again, home care, home health, hospice, whatever it may be. The other thing to note with this, when you talk about size and scale, about 70% of this group that you see in front of you here have revenue of less than 10 million. So you got a good many, 1, 2, 3 million. They all differ a little bit in terms of margin or not. But there are some, that 30%, that have really scaled their HCBS platform and have become a big, if not bigger, part of the revenue than the senior living communities that they have. We wanted to acknowledge the growth as it relates to low income, middle income. We could spend a lot of time on this, and we don't have time for that. That's a whole webinar in and of itself. I will tell you, we had a session last week at our conference on the middle market. We had Bob Kramer there from NIC, who's done some tremendous research around the middle market topic and defining that, what that looks like. Then we had 2 providers given to states in North Carolina and then Garden Spot communities in Pennsylvania, talking about what they've done to really move the needle among those that they are serving in some creative ways. But to acknowledge that there's a great deal of growth in that baby boomer cohort of that middle income group. There's growth across all income categories and tremendous growth among that top tier income group, but the numbers are not the same volume of what we're seeing with the middle income. So continue to think creatively, and be competitive in your local market. The numbers really look different if you're sitting in a California and an LA market versus what middle market looks like maybe in the middle of South Dakota. So you need to personalize those numbers, but wanted to acknowledge this is a great area of growth and great interest as well. Our session last week, there was standing room only. We couldn't fit any more chairs. I'm pretty sure the fire marshal would not have loved the numbers in there, but we were excited to see the interest among attendees. Dan referenced the Chief Strategy and Growth Officer. We've been tracking this and watching this, clearly seeing an increased trend in the number of organizations that have a growth or strategy officer. We did a survey this summer of those individuals that we have. We're tracking about 40, 50 organizations. They can change and ebb and flow a little bit, but did a survey among those individuals, and I will tell you it's largely multi-site organizations, not solely, but most come from a multi-site organization, and you can see what their roles are. It's heavily around that growth and sponsorship transition opportunities, new business lines, but it's, as we say, it's that person that gets up every day and this is their job. So clearly tied to the growth conversation. Dan's going to comment a little bit more on the for-profit piece and then just talk about capital planning for growth.
So our friends at NIC do a wonderful job tracking the growth of supply in all of their top 31 markets, which this represents, as well as up to 100. If you're in one of those markets, we'd highly recommend signing up for their basic data. It's very good data on your marketplace, and it would help you understand the growing for-profit supply in each of your markets or private sector supply. So you remember, you see at the blue line at the bottom, where not-for-profits have been growing at approximately 2% a year for since the recession, but the leading age Ziglar 200 portion has been growing at 2.8%. So that's good. But again, most of this is through expansion of existing campuses. Then you see the for-profit side, the green line in particular for independent living, passing up the assisted living line. So we had the boom in assisted living coming out of the recession, which includes freestanding memory care. So that's AL and memory care as defined by NIC. And now the independent living passing that up and clipping at 12% growth on existing supply. That's amazing. And that typically is IL, AL, and memory care together, or just IL and AL. So the two combined are averaging 10% total supply growth in the for-profit sector. We don't see that changing materially based on our evidence from how many new locations are being planned by those dozens and dozens of smaller 3 to 10 and 10 to 25 size organizations. That's who's building it. You see the logos below from some medium size organizations as the type that are growing. So if you live in the DC area, as one example, you would know the Brightview brand is up to 20 to 25, and they didn't exist, say, 15 years ago. So that's what's playing out around the country. Again, don't see it slowing down materially. Maybe it will tug back to, say it tugs back to 6 or 8% 3 years from now. That's still going to be a substantial amount of supply coming from that sector. Again, principally rental. The for-profit market has conceded the entry fee community to the not-for-profits, other than 4 or 5 for-profit operators that enjoy and are comfortable with the entry fee model. One reason for that is when an organization, when they go to sell and monetize, which is where you really drive economic gain or profit, on the for-profit side, it's much more difficult to sell entry fee communities than rental portfolios. And that's one of the many reasons. There's a number, probably about 20 plus, of why you don't see now new development on the for-profit side of entry fee, except for a select few operators. So great opportunity for not-for-profits to continue to carve out the entry fee model, while at the same time trying to ideally pursue the middle market and some other rental platforms. Next page. So when we look at the total growth in combined occupancy that you'll see fly in here, the for-profit market was larger even in 1980. This is excluding skilled nursing, but it was not the type of modern IL, AL memory care that we all see and are familiar with. So you see the rapid growth starting in the 2000s and then accelerating after the recession. And the occupancy on the for-profit side is 85.7. That includes all of that new supply. If you exclude the new supply, it approximates 87 to 87.5, with IL being over 90 and assisted living and memory care being in the mid 80s. We have generally seen and sensed that the for-profit side, market by market by market, will continue to build when they see occupancy touching 90 across the board, and start to back off if occupancy in a market drops to the mid 80s down to the low 80s. And the NIC is very good at broadcasting that. If you follow the NIC MAP marketplace, there was an email today about these statistics, and that word gets out to all the lenders, and it tends to, and developers and operators, and the market will tend to slow down when they see it drift into the low 80s. But if it touches 90, you'll see those markets heat up. Where not-for-profit occupancy is a strength at 92.3, but again, that does not include that much new supply. We have dozens and dozens and dozens of clients that are 95% up in markets around the country, such as Boston being one good example. So we see our not-for-profits as financially healthy as we've seen in years, with the lowest cost of capital we've seen, which I'll come back to. So back to this total supply growth, if we look at the top 31 markets, every day we're at a new record total number of available units. So as Tom alluded to earlier, what an opportunity for not-for-profits to grow based on the demand. And as more units get created, it creates that much more visibility for residential style senior living as one of the many options available. So if you see the NIC broadcast about occupancy being slightly down, we have said to them, and we're saying to our folks, I would not overreact to that, because every day there's a new record number of units in every market in the country, and it doesn't take long for development to slow down before occupancy catches up with today's demographic opportunities. Then, of course, within those markets, it's the differentiation between entry fee and what type of entry fee, and rental and how it's positioned in each market. And you should have an opportunity to carve out for your own brand in your markets. Next page. So, and as we go to capital now, I've noted a couple macro comments. We are sitting at for all intents and purposes, at an all-time low for virtually every borrowing source for not-for-profits. And as a reminder, not-for-profits do need to borrow and do not have access to external equity that the for-profit side does, or by definition, it wouldn't be not-for-profit. And we're going to get to in a minute what we recommend for not-for-profits to do to create the equity needed to grow. But our clients are simply looking at the basics of capital and typically need to use some amount of cash off their balance sheet on projects, but not always. They've created credit capacity or capital capacity by operating profitably, and then are able to leverage off their existing balance sheet, which is how most of you borrow. And almost everyone that's not for profit should be eligible for tax-exempt debt, but we do have some folks using taxable at times, in particular for acquisitions of situations that are not tax-exempt eligible, in particular when it includes market rate independent living units. And then, of course, we have some folks tapping into the HUD 232 program and occasionally Fannie or Freddie. But wonderful opportunity in today's market to be borrowing between 3% and 5% for virtually any project, whether you're A-rated down to unrated, and borrowing in the 5.5 plus or minus a half a point range for new campuses, depending on how much credit support is provided. Next page. So on growth capital, we recommend, and have for years, and a number of folks do this, to think about how to set up a parent structure above your core credit, which here we use the word ABC, obligated group, and then have other corporations available for growth of new locations if you do not have the credit capacity in your obligated group, or for acquisitions or affiliations. And ideally, you'll set up a system to transfer cash either in a one-time event at the time of a overall organizational refinancing, or possibly the sale of an asset, such as one of those dated nursing homes we mentioned, or parcels of land, or major gifts. So for a one-time transfer to a parent, and then to set up an annual transfer process of a reasonable amount while preserving your credit capacity of your existing organization. So we have a number of system clients that have created that structure and use the words strategic opportunity fund, strategic growth fund, mission fund, advancement fund, or apply the word capital to any of those. We like the word strategic opportunity fund or strategic growth fund, and educating the constituents of the organization, from the board or multiple boards and residents, on the importance of needing to continue to grow in today's marketplace, in particular with the demographics, to create the scale to ensure perpetuity of the organization long term. So that sounds easy, and we know what the entry fee nature of certain communities and the state laws of certain situations can make that problematic when you're a single site or a smaller organization. But our larger systems, typically when they get to 3 or 4 campuses or more, are generally able to communicate their brand and their organizational structure, and the importance of reinvestment in campuses, growth of campuses, and opportunistic growth, and the residents tend to then understand that. so we would highly recommend this approach to create capital to be able to move quickly. We mentioned the BHI organization earlier. They just presented on our system panel last week and reiterated how pleased they were that they put this system in place a decade ago and had created a reasonable amount of cash that allowed them to bring cash with the debt on that acquisition we described to win in that competitive bankruptcy process. They wouldn't have been able to do that if they hadn't created their strategic growth fund. Then as you put cash out to the projects over time, whether it's an acquisition or a new business line like HCBS or a new campus, ideally cash can then be paid back to the parent over time. So I mentioned earlier making sure you're just in a financial position to survive and thrive, but then also ideally strive to target profitability that allows you to transfer some amount of cash. So some approaches people use is X amount of days cash on hand at the end of the year if you're beyond particular targets, or X amount of cash tied to achieving operating margins or debt service coverage levels. And the transfer could be $250,000, $500,000, $1 million a year. It's not substantial numbers or more, but if you do it consistently and communicate it, it tends to put you in a position to create that strategic opportunity fund. But if you haven't been defining the metrics for your business and being proactive about it, we'd highly recommend moving in that direction. Next page. So again, on back to the concluding thoughts on capital. If you haven't looked at refinancing existing debt, and I'm sure your existing investment bankers, the Ziegler bankers for sure, or commercial bankers have contacted you about that, that is a great opportunity to reduce your interest cost, create cash flow savings, possibly as part of the refinancing, create a fund some strategic growth. We have at least 3 or 4 of our clients in the fourth quarter adding reimbursement of capital expenditures or funding their regular routine capital expenditures over the next 1 to 3 years as part of their go-to-market strategy. And they're able to pay for that with the savings from the refinancing. So think about that if you haven't. And again, that would go into the strategic growth fund. For our clients that are rated, in particular with Fitch, who now rates about 80% of the senior living organizations, they routinely comment on the importance of reinvestment in the community and the benefits of growth. Now, they'll know when at the time they might downgrade somebody because of growth, they don't say it in a negative way. They simply note that the organization's growing with particular expansion or affiliation or new campus, and the rating will be downgraded until such time as those new investments are up, running, and stable, and then there might be an opportunity for an upgrade. So a reminder, don't be a slave to your rating. When rates are this low, the rating differential is typically about 15 basis points per gradation, i.e. the difference between BBB+ and BBB. And with rates so low, that's really de minimis relative to executing on a strategic growth plan. Then on other ways to mitigate risk on growth, there's a number of development consultants available to partner with. We recommend doing that if you don't have the resources within your organization to be comfortable moving quickly. There's a number of good financial feasibility consultants and market consultants such as Love to do the market research. And then obviously, again, capital is plentiful from the investment banking side. In the debt markets, we have more institutional investors than ever supporting the not-for-profit senior living marketplace. Ziegler covers over 300. As I said, we're going to bring about $3 billion to market this year, and it's being absorbed relatively easily. And then we have the strongest support from the commercial banking market in history going up each year. Now, covenants are a little tighter, but why is it the strongest ever? Because it's being supported by local, regional, multi-state banks that are focused in their markets and don't have to be rated A or better because we're not using letters of credits. We're doing direct bank lending. So wonderful opportunities in the capital markets with a broad range of 3 to 6%, but for most of you, it's broadly speaking, 3 to 5% fixed rate over 30 years, or below 3% if you want to go floating or lock in a bank loan for 5 to 10 years through a swap. So Lisa, with that, we'll turn it back over to Tom.
Well, thank you, Dan and Lisa, for that. Some great information. A couple of quick questions. And first, I should note, if any of you have questions, here are our email addresses, and I'm certain that any of us would be happy to answer your questions. We do have a couple questions here, and so the first one is, what is Ziegler anticipating for the economy over the next 3 years? Should we be planning for an expansion now?
And I'm assuming they're saying it. Yeah, I'll jump in, Lisa. I'm assuming they mean an expansion of their community.
I'm assuming as well.
Yeah, on the economy, and just today's news and the stock market, I haven't looked at the stock market since we started speaking, but there's always going to be daily news on the question of when we're at the longest expansion in the history of the country at 10 plus years, which we could wax on about the reasons why. Most economists don't see a material recession coming. Folks are concerned about the slowdown and can we maintain 2% growth or higher, ideally 2.5 to 3. And the risk that we face when you're hovering around 2 is any major external event, uncontrollable event, could knock the country into a recession. But it does not appear there's anything on the horizon in a meaningful way that would create a financial bubble recession, although there's different signs. So I'm leading up to, I would not expect a recession, just a slowdown or a muted economy at times over the next 3 years. And I would say to that person that asked, with the demand that we've highlighted and the rapid pace of the for-profit growth that's not going to stop, I would seize the opportunity in each of your markets with your brand as fast as you can, while ensuring you put your get your financial house in order if you're not, because you're not, the for-profit side's not going to stop parachuting in with different product type around you. And the we're not expecting the capital side to pull back on that side. So I'd recommend moving ahead quickly. Just keep your eye on external events that might create a recession, and we'll all hear about it if and when that happens.
Thanks for that, Dan. So we are tight on time here, so I'm going to take one more question. And again, then we'll certainly answer any additional questions you have via email. So the last question we'll take is, this person asks, Lisa talked about managing risk. What's the best way to determine what we should be adding to our services portfolio next?
I can start with that, and then Dan, I'll let you comment. But I think it's a number of things. I think it's understanding your market first. What are there gaps in the market? For you to go out and necessarily, start up and create on your own organically a new home health agency when it's a very competitive environment, that may be difficult. Not to say others haven't gone in with more robust models and platforms into competitive environments and done well, but you really need to know, the differing business models with that. So I think knowing your market and where the demands are, and also knowing, what have you been good at and where have you had success. It's not to say, it's not okay to push yourself out into, new ventures, but, what are you good at and what maybe, hasn't been your lane. And if there's a new venture that you haven't, entered into in the past, for example, running a rental community is very different than an entry fee product. The staffing patterns are different. The margins are different. It's a different customer. It's just very different, and you need to do your homework in advance. So I think almost doing a bit of an audit of where your market is, what's out there from a competitive standpoint, what have you done historically? Have there been any fails and why? What are some lessons learned with that? And then advance forward. And some of it's just driven by your risk too. One of where we've seen a lot of success is just continuing to expand out on existing footprints. But, I would say, continuing to build out that, local regional presence from a geographic standpoint probably makes the most sense unless you're a larger national platform. Dan, what else would you add to that?
You hit them all, gap analysis without repeating what you're strong at, core competencies. And yes, we mentioned the national system, and there's a number of national healthcare systems. but we see our, when you get away from the top 20, our fastest growing, strongest, best positioned, best branded are what we call sub-metropolitan on one part of a metro area, metropolitan, or multi-county, or state regional, or say bi or tri-state. Those are the not-for-profits we see growing their brands, and that makes it easier then to figure out the additional business lines to get into when you're getting out of bed every day, focused on your core markets and adjacent markets. And so I just say keep studying that pattern from a strategic perspective. Then on the home health side, I will say if you see that as an option, a number of your peers have kickstarted home health, home care by serving their own residents first, and then when they feel like they've got that in order, they've gone out and pursued purchasing home health and home care agencies that you might be able to buy in your market at $500,000, $1 million, $2 million before you get up with the big boys. And there's a number of, you just have to scout your own market and find those folks. And Lisa, you and I could rattle off 10 of the leading age Ziglar 200 that have purchased small home health agencies in the last 5 years as a way to kickstart that.
Well, thank you for that. And certainly I will echo that understanding the supply and demand, in other words, the market feasibility in your market. So looking to the data to help kind of paint the picture of where you should be looking and where you should be running from. And certainly in addition to that, on the market intelligence side, looking at consumer research to hear what the market thinks about your brand, your product, and how that might fit with the new product certainly can help point you in the right direction. And with that, I'm going to thank everyone for their time. Again, just a reminder, this session has been recorded, and we will send it out to everyone who has both attended and RSVP'd, and it will also have a permanent home on the Loving Company website. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.